All right, welcome back. This is our second video of the week. Yesterday we looked at points on a graph and that we saw that the points, the x and y switched, and you practice them on the delta math. Today we're going to look at just a couple. I have 4 examples of finding inverse functions, just like 2-step ones. Tomorrow we'll look at a little harder ones. So first thing, if you want to title your notes for today, it's Tuesday, whatever date you're on, so you just kind of keep a frame of reference. And then we're finding inverse functions. So I have Tuesday 3:31, finding inverse functions. So think about inverse functions are things that undo each other, like multiplication, division, add and subtract, power and root. So when we did so some of you intuitively, so if you see addition in the problem, you're going to see subtraction. If you see a power of 5, you're going to see a root of 5. But these problems could get a little bit more difficult with 3 or 4 steps. So I want to show you algebraically how you can find the inverse. So first thing, I'm going to just put over here the steps. So first thing, switch the x and y. Switch x and the y. So basically when you see f of x, that same as saying y equals. So instead of y, we're going to put an x. So x equals y to the 5th plus 3. So don't change any operation in it. So where we see f of x, that's our y. Put x there instead. And then we have y to the 5th plus 3. And then the second thing you're going to just do is get y by itself. Get y by itself. So basically we know our equation needs to be is a y equals equation. So we're just going to undo what's happening in the problem by then getting y by itself. So I want you to, I'll put over here, so think about the order. So if we're actually solving a problem, we'd follow order of operations. So the first thing is parentheses, then we have exponents, we have multiply and divide, and then we have add and subtract. Okay, so we know that from our middle school math. So when we're trying to find the inverse, we're working on order of operations when we're undoing things, just like when we're solving a problem in reverse. So think about, you can't undo the power before you undo the add and subtract. So how do you undo the plus 3? Well, you have to subtract 3 from both sides. So we could say x minus 3 equals y to the 5th. X minus 3 equals y to the 5th. And then so then there's no multiply and divide, there's the exponent. How do you undo the 5th power? Well, what undoes the power is the root. So make sure when you take the 5th root, so remember we got power divided by root, 5 over 5, they undo each other, they cancel out. That'd just be y to the 1st. So you've got to take the 5th root of the whole thing. So if this isn't in parentheses, if you had to subtract 3 first, you've got the 5th root of x minus 3 has to be underneath. So I'm going to put inverse notation. So I have f, it looks like f to the negative 1st of x, but that means the inverse of f of x equals the 5th root of x minus 3. So the inverse of f of x equals the 5th root of x minus 3 is how I'd like it. Or if that was g of x, then you go g to the negative 1st. Okay, so there's one example. We're going to go through a couple more. So just give me a minute. I'll erase this. Okay, so for number 2, if you would write down, I wrote them down on a separate sheet of paper. Number 2, I have f of x equals x to the 3rd divided by 7. So I just picked a few problems that I saw in some of the examples. So first, again, switch the x and y. So this is same as saying y equals x cubed divided by 7. So when we switch the x and y, we put x equals y to the 3rd divided by 7. So think about, there's no add and subtract, but there's division. How do I undo dividing by 7? I multiply both sides by 7. So I get 7x equals y to the 3rd power. And then how do I undo the 3rd power? Well, this time I take the cube root of both sides. So I'm just going to put inverse notation. So again, this means f to the negative first of x. It's saying the inverse of f of x equals the cube root of 7x is all underneath it. So that's what you're doing. You're undoing what's happened in the original problem. If there's division, then there's multiplication. If there's power, then there's root. So you're undoing what's happening originally in the problem. All right, number three. Let's see. Let's go with f of x equals the cube root of x minus 2. All right, so f of x. Again, that's saying y equals. So switch the x and y. So let's put x equals the cube root of y minus 2. So don't change any part of the problem. Just switch the x and y. And then we undo what's happened in the problem to find its inverse function. So this time you cannot move the minus 2 over. It's underneath the cube root. That's like your parentheses, your grouping symbols. That's what we have to do last. So what we need to undo is the cube root.